Nigeria's COVID-19 tally pushes near 21,000 as NCDC announces 675 fresh cases on Monday. The nation's inflation rate rises to two-year high amid the new coronavirus pandemic. In international news, new COVID-19 outbreak in Germany sparks fresh local lockdown. And in sport, Burnley apologized over White Lives Matter banner.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The nation's coronavirus case total has inched closer to 21,000 after the Nigerian Center for Disease Control announced 675 new infections on Monday. New cases in Lagos have continued to spiral as 288 infections were recorded in the state. Oyo followed with 76 cases, surpassing Rivers by 20 cases. Total tally now stands at 20,919 confirmed cases, and CDC reports slightly more than 7,000 patients have been discharged. The virus has claimed more than 500 lives. Meanwhile, the federal government has charged that most Nigerians, especially in the southeast region, do not believe the deadly coronavirus exists. National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force, Dr. Sani Aliyu, made the charge during the PTF daily briefing on Monday, where he said 6 in 10 persons in the region believe COVID-19 is a scam. He said even some states are endangering lives of their citizens by subscribing to that notion. He emphasized the importance of wearing face masks in public places and the observance of physical distancing. He said there is partial to non-compliance with these health and safety requirements. The federal High Court in Port Harcourt has halted any moves by Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki to participate in the governorship primary election of the People's Democratic Party. Obaseki's move to participate in the primary was challenged in court by one of the party's chieftains, Omorige Obage Heyama. Though himself is an aspirant, he had petitioned the court to stop Obaseki from participating in the primary, pointing to the fact that Obaseki was newly admitted to the party after defecting from the All Progressives Congress APC. Justice E.A. Obili ruled in Ogede Ihiyama's favor. Obaseki officially joined the PDP last week and was later granted a waiver by the party's National Working Committee to contest in the party's governorship election primary. The Kano chapter of the Nigerian Labour Congress has suspended its planned one-week warning strike in the state over some issues that includes the May deduction of worker salary. The state's party leadership said in a statement the action is a result of the agreement and resolution reached between Kano State Government and the NLC on Monday on its demands. If an agreement had not been reached on Monday, a warning strike action would have begun on Tuesday, as the NLC ultimatum to the state government expired on Monday night. The statement said the government has promised to refund the deduction made from workers' salary in May. The statement also said the state government has agreed that when its financial situation improves, it will consider full implementation of the consequential salary adjustment scale brought about by the 30,600 naira minimum wage. As Nigeria continues to deal with the economic implication of the COVID-19 pandemic, the National Bureau of Statistics has reported that inflation rate has risen to 12.4% in May. That raises the rate by 0.6 of a percentage point than the 12.3% recorded in April. This figure indicates the highest in more than 2 years, and correspondent Deji Badvas breaks down the numbers for us.
The rise in the inflation rate did not come as a surprise to many. But what is worrying is that it is being driven by high food prices. The National Bureau of Statistics put the food inflation rate at 15.04%, which is the highest since March 2018. In the market, people are feeling the pinch.
Honestly, it is not palatable, my brother. If you see what I'm buying, I go to, that is 2,700 now. Something we can buy for 1,500 in the past. Even 1,000 now. Well, it's just a lap. It's just a lap of goat meat.
I used to buy a tuber of yam for 1,000 and at times 800. But on getting to this place this afternoon, it's calling 3 tubers of yam 3,200 naira, which means the price has gone up.
Apart from the lockdown restrictions imposed by the government, which has made movement of food produce across the country a bit more difficult, experts say part of the reasons for the rising food inflation is the closure of the country's land borders, which has been on since August last year, and violence in the north of the country, where the government is struggling to put an end to the Boko Haram insurgency and armed banditry.
We still have a lot of productivity challenges. We have disruptions in the supply of in the production of agricultural products, especially because of the security problems around the country and all of that. So the combination of all of these factors are the ones driving the inflationary pressure as far as food is concerned.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has thrown several measures at keeping the inflationary pressure in check and not too far away from its target band of 9%. But the measures have not been completely effective, as inflation has been on an upward trajectory for 9 consecutive months now.
The issue is much beyond what the central bank alone can do. From all indications, the central bank has practically exhausted its response instruments as far as inflationary pressure is concerned. So there is a limit to which monetary intervention can solve this problem. We need to deal with the issues of cost, the issues of transportation costs, the issues of productivity, and the issues of the disruption in the general supply chains in the economy.
With the local currency under severe pressure, experts say the inflation rate would rise further in the coming months. And with no end in sight to the COVID-19 pandemic, the country's economy faces tougher times ahead.
As the federal government prepares for a reopening of the country's airspace to commercial flights, it is starting a simulation trial of domestic flights at the Murtala Muhammed Airport in Lagos on Saturday. Minister of Aviation Hadi Sirika stated this in Abuja on Monday during the daily briefing of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. He said ticket prices will not skyrocket as a result of the plan to implement social distancing rules on board the aircraft. The minister said his ministry has been meeting with industry players to ensure ticket prices do not get out of reach of travelers.
Coming up, African news. Men in South Africa march against gender-based violence. And later, international news. New COVID-19 outbreak in Germany sparks fresh local lockdown.
You are watching ANN.
I better go. I feel like saying the food don't take time finish. Push!
Oh! When they're supposed to buy food, they will not buy. We look here. It's still the same 200 naira food. We will still buy.
Okay, 200. Make I put your usual bill.
Yes, but you go add 888. Join now.
It's a big level.
Is it not 200 you give that lady?
Now 888 is that.
888 now the new AWOOF. Recharge with star 888 star pin hash to enjoy 5 times AWOOF from MTN to call any network. You fit also enjoy a on top VTU. Just ask your vendor for AWOOF for you.
Conductor, where my other naira change?
Office man, you know they forget money self.
Oh, Forget care. You go even hide it join that shit. Give my change, bro.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In a landmark ruling, the High Court in Kampala has granted voting rights to citizens who are incarcerated and those living in the diaspora. The Electoral Commission now has to make arrangements to include them on the voters register to participate in next year's general election. Hilary Ayasiga reports.
These prisoners can now vote for the candidate of their choice while in jail. The High Court in Uganda has allowed them to participate in the upcoming presidential elections. Lawyer Stephen Kalali has been leading the fight to extend voting rights.
I'm happy that the judge clearly elaborated and agreed with us that there is no law that bars these two categories of citizens. And being in prison, whether on remand or a convict, doesn't take away your citizenship.
The court ruling benefits those above 18 years of age who are in prison or living abroad. For 20 years now, prisoners and members of the Ugandan diaspora have not been allowed to participate in national elections. Campaigners say that was a violation of their democratic rights, and they welcome the change in the law. Prison authorities say this is the right move, but want further guidance from the country's electoral body.
Prisoners who are already inside were never registered, like the people in the diaspora, and there is a harmonization between information from the national ID and the voter registration. So that one has to be ironed out.
The Uganda Electoral Commission says it will ensure that all eligible voters are given an opportunity to make their voices heard.
Whoever citizens who qualify to vote are, the Commission is required or obliged to reach them, to register them, to create polling stations so that they can exercise their democratic right.
Uganda joins other African countries like Kenya, Nigeria and South Africa who have allowed prisoners and citizens outside the country to vote. The government is currently fast-tracking virtual campaigns because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's hoped that campaigning digitally and through the media can better reach the new categories of voters.
Men in South Africa have decided to rally against gender-based violence. They have organized themselves and have marched to the Union Building in Pretoria to present a petition to the presidency. Correspondent Yolisa Injamela was there.
Gender-based violence here in South Africa has increased dramatically since the government declared a national state of disaster to fight the spread of the coronavirus. A statement from the presidency indicates that 21 women and children have been killed in the past few weeks. Act Now is a new movement of South African men who have organized themselves to fight the crisis of gender-based violence. They marched to the union buildings to present a petition to the presidency. A number of young women have been brutally killed here in South Africa in the past few weeks alone, and these men are asking government to come up with tangible solutions to deal with the perpetrators.
We are calling for constitutional reform, we're calling for police reform, we're calling for police visibility and effective presence. We call on family and community unit development. We call on men to engage in dialogue with ourselves. We call on men to engage in dialogue with young men of our country.
Act now, and enough is enough of our women being killed by us men. And this is the movement, this is an awareness to tell our brothers, to tell the husbands out there who might be perpetrators who are killing women, to say, today we are watching you. Wherever you are, we are watching you, and the law will catch you along the way.
I'm here because I'm against gender-based violence. I just want to say to our brothers there, stop killing our sisters, stop killing our children, and stop killing your wives.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has in the past described gender-based violence and femicide as a crisis that is tearing South Africa's society apart. A crisis that affects every community and that touches the lives of most families in one way or another. Victims or survivors of gender-based violence often point to a failure by authorities to deal decisively with perpetrators. As a result, many of them refrain from reporting the acts.
We really appreciate these efforts because government alone will not succeed in this battle. It needs to be embraced with a partnership from society and from all of us who are here.
The Act Now movement says this march is only the first step in helping end gender-based violence. The movement's other efforts include assisting the survivors of gender-based violence.
Somewhere in the world, every second of the day, news is happening. And of course, Nigeria is bustling with news day and night. That is why ANN doesn't sleep. Our eyes are peeled, wide open, so no story escapes our radar. We stay abreast of world events and happenings at home. We keep you up to the minute in the world of sports. We give you information to stay on top of your investments and all the hard facts you'll need to navigate your day. If you miss us on air, you can keep up to date on our website and on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. We are ANN, Africa News Network. We do news right in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Australia's economy is suffering its first recession in nearly 3 decades as the nation grapples with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The COVID-19 shutdown has caused the end of a 29-year run of economic growth in Australia. Correspondent Greg Navarro reports.
Okay, this is best. For Sydney jeweler Gurmeet Tooley, the impact from COVID-19 has been dramatic.
My business dropped down straight away from 30 to 40%.
Nestled in the heart of a multicultural suburb, Tooley's business is dependent on young migrants who've moved here to study and settle down.
Most of the income which I depend on is making engagement rings for the people, the youngsters, and the marriage got cancelled.
Many sectors of Australia's economy have been impacted by the halt in immigration since the country closed its borders in March to help manage the outbreak. Before the pandemic, international students accounted for up to 40% of Australia's migrant intake.
That's meant that most international students haven't been coming, and so that's had a big hit on the universities across Australia. Massive billion-dollar losses to the tertiary education sector.
A sudden drop in newly arrived migrants is also being felt in the housing market.
It has had an immediate impact on our business, and it's just taken away that market immediately, just almost overnight.
Australia has one of the highest percentages of migrants in the world. Permanent migrants here tend to be educated and fill skill shortages in various sectors. Australia's economy was showing signs of weakening well before the pandemic, in fact, toward the end of last year. Some economists believe that immigration and the benefits that come with it helped to keep the country's economy from slipping into recession at the time. But now that Australia is in a pandemic-fueled recession and unemployment is rising, there are renewed calls to reduce the country's migrant intake once the borders are opened.
The key thing is immigration generates jobs for for other Australians. It doesn't take their jobs. So in order to get the unemployment down, to reduce those on the unemployment queues, immigration is what assists in that process.
Real estate buyer's agent Rich Harvey agrees.
Migrants spend money across all areas, not just in housing. They're spending money, educating their children, they're buying cars, they're buying furnishings, they're improving their lifestyle. So the input-output that the migrants bring to this country is absolutely tremendous. So we wouldn't have the rate of growth we have today without the level of migration that we have in Australia.
Considering Australia's success in managing the pandemic so far, Harvey and others expect an even greater demand in people wanting to migrate here once international border restrictions are lifted.
German authorities have decided to reinstate local lockdown measures after 1,500 employees of a meat packing plant tested positive to coronavirus. It is the first move since Germany began lifting its lockdown restrictions nationwide last month. State Premier Armin Laschet says the preventative measures in the affected district with a population of 360,000 would last until the end of the month. The country has been applauded for its quick response to the pandemic, but there are fears of infections arising again. Laschet describes the outbreak linked to the meat packing plant as the biggest infection incident in the country. He has appealed to local residents not to travel to other districts. The state premier says bars, museums, cinemas and gyms must all close, and restaurants can only serve meals to take away. Stricter social distancing measures are back in force, and nurseries for 50,000 children have been closed. Authorities have also put in place a mandatory quarantine for all employees of the plant with 3 police units on ground to enforce the measures. Chinese and Indian military commanders have agreed to disengage their forces after a clash that left 20 Indian soldiers dead. The countries reached the agreement in their first meeting since the mid-June confrontation along the Himalayan frontier. The face-off has been described as the deadliest since between the two countries in nearly half a century. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Qiu Liqian says the two sides have agreed to take necessary measures to cool down the situation after an in-depth analysis of the border control issues. India claims 20 of her soldiers died in the fracas. Its security officials say the fatalities were caused by severe injuries and exposure to sub-freezing temperatures. 27-year-old Rachel Brooks, shot to death by an Atlanta police officer, will be buried next Tuesday. Brooks was running away from 2 officers 12 days ago when he was felled by 2 police bullets to the back in Atlanta, Georgia. His funeral will be held at Atlanta's historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. Martin Luther King had pastored and preached. The officer that shot Brooks, Garrett Wolf, had been fired and is facing charges that include felony murder and aggravated assault. If convicted of felony murder, he would face the death penalty. The second officer at the scene, Devin Grossman, was charged with violation of oath and aggravated assault for allegedly standing on Brooks' shoulder after he was shot.
Up next, sport. Burnley apologized over White Lives Matter banner. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and Sport. Burnley have condemned a White Lives Matter Burnley banner that was flown by a small plane over the Etihad Stadium just before their English Premier League match against Manchester City on Monday. Burnley have apologized, expressing disappointment and embarrassment. The club is working with authorities to identify those responsible. It says that display does not represent the value for which Burnley Football Club stands. Since the English Premier League resumed, all players of the 20 top-flight clubs have replaced their names on the back of their jerseys with the message Black Lives Matter. Everton boss Carlo Ancelotti has been accused of not paying €1 million in taxes. The charge relates to tax due from his earnings from image rights during his time at Real Madrid boss in 2014. The prosecutor's office claims the 61-year-old concealed revenues and was intending to avoid his tax duties towards the public treasury. Ancelotti is yet to respond. Everton did not comment. That is it in news this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, ANNAfrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.